Okay, thank you everybody for joining me today, where we're going to take a look at lesson 3 and all the components that are involved with that. We're going to look at the site and regional challenges survey, as well as looking at their sector compass, which is an exciting part of the site analysis, and it's a really good starting point, I would say. Even though we have started with climate and some basic images of your project site, we're now going to sort of get a little bit deeper into some elements that do affect the project site itself and sort of set the stage for the design process. So without further ado, let us take a look. I'm just going to share my screen here. And great to see good attendance today. So thank you everybody for showing up. It's not always a convenient time or easy to get time. So hopefully everybody can see my screen there. And I'll just get my little pointer tool happening here. So yeah, lesson 3 should be very interesting for everyone. We're starting to go down that site analysis process, that journey, and a couple of things that we're asking for in this lesson, of course, is the site and regional challenges survey, which is a really useful exercise to go through. It is pretty straightforward. We're just looking at sort of big picture regional items, as well as some of those sort of specific site challenges. And again, those do help build on the site analysis itself and prepare, better prepare us for when we're applying some design approaches to our project here. So I think this is pretty straightforward. Not too mysterious anyways. If we look at, let's see here, we'll look at the rubric. And you can see that survey, we're gonna allocate 4 points, and then the sector analysis, or sorry, sector compass, really the same thing. We're allocating 10 points, so that's a good hint that there's a lot more time and effort going into the sector compass. If we take a peek at one of the student examples that is you're able to access through the modules section of the website here, or the platform, these are really useful to reference, especially if you have any question of how something should be assembled. Everybody's going to provide a slightly different batch of information, and the way they depict it in terms of the graphics, etc. But this is certainly a great place to reference. So with this student, you can see they've listed cultural, socioeconomic challenges, some of the strengths and opportunities within the region. Okay, so this is a slightly bigger picture. And then there is normally some graphics that you can include. And in this case, this person's pointing out some of the challenges with housing affordability. And these average prices were from 2019. I imagine they are significantly more today, as they would be just about everywhere in North America and Europe, I'm sure. So then we get to our next slide here, where we're looking at most likely natural disasters and some of the strategies that we could employ to really help mitigate those. Obviously, when we're looking at earthquakes, there's not much we can do in terms of preventing that, but there are certainly things that we can do to prepare for, say, not having access to electricity, or perhaps even potable water, right? If you're in an urban site, there could be some disruptions with infrastructure. Then we get to the site challenges, where we're looking at problems and weaknesses there. And of course, some obstacles to resolving them, which there normally is. And sort of the cost of, what's been the cost of those, not necessarily financial costs, but the cost in terms of this, maybe some aspects of moving forward with the design, or better managing the site. Then we have your SWOT analysis, and then an opportunity to provide feedback, which we encourage, or any questions you have there. And yeah, that's about it for that part of the assignment. I think that one is pretty straightforward. So the juicier bit, and what I would consider a little more interesting, would be the sector compass itself. And that, I'm sure you've all... Oh,
Jamie, before we move away from the kind of regional challenges,
yeah.
We have, one of our main challenges is forest fire, but most of the land is owned by the federal government. So I don't know what sort of, I noticed in there, they were saying, well, you could buy up the logging land or something, but that doesn't seem like that's an option. I don't know. I don't know what sort of, I guess, solutions we could offer with that.
Yeah, regionally, with regards to forest fire or forest management, that's really a tough one to provide viable solutions, other than what, perhaps your project site is an acreage setting that is wooded. Well, then you do have some ability to reduce either loads that are currently on your site. And I know that's not regional, but yes, you're quite right. When we look at some of these big picture items, our hands are, I won't say they're tied, but they might as well be in some aspects, because our influence on how they manage forests is pretty minimal, right? That would be almost a lifetime of advocating to get any sort of movement in that direction. I would almost say, when we look at things like forest fire, is how we can, even though that might be a regional challenge, how can we better prepare our project site to accommodate that, right?
Okay, so look at hardening your site, but not necessarily the region.
Yeah, I mean, our almost every regional challenge, whether it be, where I live, one of the challenges would be depleting groundwater. And, what can I do regionally to help that? Well, every year I'm part of what's called a water day within the regional district here. I give talks on rainwater harvesting and how to better manage soils, but that's it. I mean, they're not coming to me for answers, right? So, however, when we get into our project sites, we certainly have the abilities to apply whatever we can within that to buffer it. But I know where I live, if we had a forest fire rip through our area, my trees would probably be going up like everybody else's. My house hopefully would be still here, and that's what we would be aiming to, to protect as best we can. But and some of the work actually we're doing this fall is going to really dial into that. So it's timely that you mentioned forest fires, and I think on the West Coast, that's just one of the biggest threats now in almost every area. So
also just interject to say that the CAL FIRE has a different policy with regard to how to deal with fire than the Forest Service, and those two things can be, I think that is one of the things that we can do, because I'm working up in Modoc County, so I get that concern, is just talk to our, they do have meetings when there's a fire, and excuse me, attend, because a lot of them are on Zoom, so you can speak up and say, hey, I understand, Forest Service, that your policy is to essentially let it burn and save property and life, and that's pretty much it. Whereas CAL FIRE is, they want to put it out. So can we come up with a balance? So I think just vocal public advocacy is about the only thing we can do, but it is something.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point.
That is a good point.
Yeah, applying pressure is about all we can do, and if enough people hear about it, that pressure just increases, and that could be with any topic, and certainly wildfire, forest fire threats are substantial enough to catch everybody's attention. When you talk about things like food security, a lot of people glaze over because they go to the store and the food's there, so what's the problem? But you're quite right. And there are a lot of different approaches for wildfire, not so much prevention, but buffering the intensity of it, and intentional burns, and there's a lot of obviously First Nations practices that were really healthy in terms of, yes, fires are naturally occurring, but the way we've been managing forests, we've allowed a lot of fuel to be left there waiting. And in British Columbia here, we have a pine beetle that's destroyed thousands of acres of forest, and that's just that's a tinderbox waiting to go. So yeah, I mean, I think on a lot of levels, there is so much for North America and the world to learn about managing lands. And in some ways, it's standing back a little bit, and not over. Well, the over extraction doesn't help, but just to we wouldn't be having these sort of troubles if we weren't such bad managers. We'll say that. Generally speaking, we're pretty bad at what we're when we take on even agricultural lands, are monocropped or are really disastrous ecologically. So, but we have tools that we can make a difference with, and that all starts, in my opinion, that starts with our own homesteads and projects that we're involved with, and it can certainly spread out and influence others. So, it's a slow process, that is for sure. Does anybody else want to chat about any of these site or regional challenges before I move on? Okay. We shall head on to the sector compass, and that is a very interesting graphics or map to put together. So in this situation, I'm sure a lot of you have gone through your content already or are looking at it, but really it's we're looking at energies that are outside of the property that that have a significant influence on it. And there's some good examples here. That could be the sun. So that would be with sun sectors. It could be wind. It could be a threat of fire. It could be noise. That's certainly where I live. We have a highway, within a kilometer that we hear. There's viewscapes, which are, often positive, but they could be negative. You might have a view of something that's not desirable. There's wildlife and water flows, and there are other factors there that you could also dial into. But I would say those are some of the big ones. And we want to, the tricky part here is actually taking that information and applying it graphically, so that it makes sense to you and it makes sense to anybody who's looking at that drawing. And with those sectors, we also want to take a look at whether we want to amplify them, whether they're favorable. So an example there might be winter light, right? You want to enhance or amplify winter sun that's coming onto your site. We might want to deflect it. That could be the summer heat, and you might also want to accept it. So you're quite open to allowing that to be captured and stored. So these are important aspects. We do want to identify whether those sectors, how we're going to manage them within our design process. And then we've got a clear list here of some of the elements that we want to include. And at the end, we're getting more into some of the proximities of the site to a grocery store, to population, to fuel stations, to nearby stores, public spaces, and hospitals. So that's something that you ideally want to include as a label of some description. And let's take a look at an example of that.
What do you mean by a public space?
It could be a public park. It
Okay.
could be a regional park or a state park.
So some sort of open space.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So the sector compass. So here is an example of what one student has done. And after this, I'll show you what we will typically do in our designs. But here we've got a number of different items, and we have the summer solstice and winter solstice sun sectors here. These are really useful to include. And obviously with the summer, there's a variety of actions that you want to take. With the winter as well, it's very rare that you'd want to deflect or screen yourself from winter sun. We have prevailing winds here, and those may be summer and winter. We also have fire. And this is one interesting sector that I think that some students perhaps misinterpret a little bit. I would say that in an urban setting, that may be substantially diminished just based on the amount of disturbance that we see in most urban settings. So there's not a lot of combustible materials that are going to drive a fire from block to block. It can happen, but this is really more significant in larger sites that have wooded areas surrounding them. We've got views here. So there's a little peekaboo view. In this case, it's through a gate from the road, and there's often a wildlife sector. It's not shown here. I don't see it because they've been fenced. And if the sector's not part of the project site, you don't have to list it, right? And then there's pollution and noise, and then neighbors, or you could say privacy. That would be something very similar. Then of course there's some notes down here as to the proximity of some of these areas that were described earlier that we wanted to know about: grocery stores or public spaces, a hospital, fuel station, etc. And then we've got a north arrow and a scale bar here, as well as your name. If there was anything to improve, I would say having that sort of standardized little title block that that you've placed in your base map, that would always be handy to carry forward into all of the design sheets. So you have an address, coordinates, and all of that within each design sheet. That's just, in my opinion, a best practice. You're not going to lose any points or anything for not doing that, but it's a good habit to get in. And the nice thing with this format is we can see the project site clearly and all these sectors and the description on one page. So if you can do that, that is ideal. If we had this legend on a separate page, it then becomes a little bit more cumbersome deciphering it. Then we've got our SWOT analysis, where we're taking a look at some of these sectors and where those strengths are and weaknesses and opportunities and threats as well. So that is super useful to go through. And I'll just quickly show you sort of a typical sector map that we might do. It'd be a little bit similar but different. There's a lot of ways graphically you can depict this. I prefer, that's just my preference, is to put these circles on the outside. Some people will have bands of color coming into the center of the base plan, and I find that that gets a little bit distracting, but that's, not really that important. That's more personal taste. And then we have a little description here and sort of an action box down below. So this is, for us, this is the first sheet that we would generate. We typically we'll put our base plan together, but that's not something that we specifically would provide to our client as a separate sheet. There's really no need for that. In fact, with our design package here, this is you can see we only have 7 sheets on this, but there's a lot of time and energy that goes into that. So that may be something for those who want to continue on after this course on a professional level, is taking that template idea and distilling it down a little bit into components that you feel offer your clients a lot of value. Yeah, so again, these sectors are very similar to what we described before, and I don't think there's anything terribly different there. And I won't get into, we'll come back to this particular sheet as we go through other lessons, because here we've got water, which we're going to be in lesson 5. And we've got some other things there too that might be of interest. I always enjoy sharing stuff with people, because that's definitely one of the ways that I found for myself really helpful in expanding my knowledge, was just seeing what other people were doing. Especially where we live, it's not really highly populated area. So we found actually in the first 5 or 10 years of our business that when you're seeing your own work all the time, it gets difficult, and it's wonderful to see what other people do, and you might not agree with it, but that's besides the point. It's just wonderful to see different creative processes that people go through. Let me just share that screen again. We'll go back to that example. We have assignment resources here. That's a tab you might want to look at. And for some reason, it's kind of misbehaving on my page. I'm not too sure why, but I see that when we click on the site and regional challenges, we also have these resources listed here. So there's lots of info within the discussion board, and that's what we continually are trying to improve upon, is when we have a discussion board, is try and place as much information and resources on that page as possible, rather than sending you off in a different direction to find any of these little answers to questions you might have. And I see that our Q&A sheet is empty here, which is just fine. So I would put it out to the group here if anybody has any questions that come to mind about this sector compass. No? Okay, that's pretty straightforward then. Let me take a look at the template.
Is there, I do have a question about the like pollution and noise and stuff. Is that something that you would just like, was that an observation, or would you actually try and find, I guess, data on that? Do you have to have a table or something, or is that just something you observe at the site?
I would say that's a site observation. Yeah. So if we go back to, I'll just go back to the example that I had up before. And that's when we look at noise, that is a pretty big item in this particular design, where we have probably within about 400 or 500 feet, there's a highway that runs right by this property. There's a mound and then a highway, and the mound helps buffer some of that. But it's actually, we were working on this site this summer, finishing up phase 3 of this project. They're doing it in little phases, and it's just deafening. And there's actually very little that we can do other than, because even trees, shrubs, vegetation helps, but it is, you need acres and acres and acres of vegetation to be effective. The mound that was created next to the highway is helpful, but again, so yes, getting back to your question, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here. Yeah, it'd be site observations, and this is really what we're trying to dial into on this particular assignment, is the value of being on the site and really absorbing what you're witnessing, and also interacting with your client to find out. See, what we do with this sheet is we'll put this together and send it to our clients and say, does this align with what you see? And they may go, oh, no, there's, this little privacy issue over here, or, they may add to it. And then that's a wonderful template to move forward with. We then know some of the challenges that we have in front of us, and some of them we'll be able to definitely address, such as flood. That's something you would be very high on the list. This topograph, we have some contours here, and this is elevation gain as we go up here. So there's quite a slope from adjacent properties coming down on this property. So we know we had to protect this portion of the landscape, and that all tied in if we go forward with a new patio surface and drainage behind the retaining wall. And then all this water ended up getting shot out into a rain garden, as well as water off the roof. So that's what we did recently. But that's how this all plays in, is these site observations. So we know we've got to address the flood. Privacy is usually a fairly easy thing to do, in my experience. But there are other things like the, fire sector. there's a park up and behind this property, and kind of like we were saying before, this is managed by the provincial government of British Columbia, and our influence on that, it's zero, basically. So we did what we could, mitigating that. And of course, wildlife, that's a biggie. And on an urban setting, fencing wasn't achievable. So we're using deer-resistant material. And then we had an enclosed vegetable garden there too. So that's how we skirt that one. So each one of these things are definitely considered as we go through that design process. And they're very, very helpful, right? It's much like, and this is the way we work, it's much like the client survey. We basically reference that continually as we go through each different layer of the drawing. And because you can't, or at least for myself, I can't keep it all current and available in my head. So especially because we're doing multiple designs at once, so it seems anyways. And yeah, these documents really, really help move forward with, sound ideas. And with ourselves, we have a very inclusive process. So we will do our sector compass and submit that, and then we'll edit this as needed. And then we get to our water layer here. And then we will submit this and edit that. So if there's anything that we miss, it gets picked up, right? Because we build edits into our drawings here. So, okay. Let me see here. Sorry, I'm getting a little off topic. Okay, so that, I hope, answers your question in terms of, yes, it's all site analysis. Now, I should back up a little bit. When we get to the sun sectors and wind sectors, those are things we can reference in electronically, get some data off the net for that. And there will be some resources that, if we go back, we look at some of the resources here. There's some wind data that we can access. There's also sun data that's accessible. The sun calc here, that's a pretty good site to use. We'll just fire that up. So let's say, pretty easy to use. I'm just going to type in the town I live in. There we go. And boom, I get the sun sector with these options here, right? So you just have to make sure that you are clicking the dates that you want. So we want the summer solstice. And there we go. So I can basically trace this to get my summer sun sector. And then we can go back and we can move that to December. And you can see the dramatic change there. And how that would affect. So I believe that is our current position of the sun today. So we would ignore that. But graphically, it's quite easy to capture this. And then we also have some altitude and azimuth information here if one wanted to know that. And then some shadow information on objects at certain heights. So if you had a tree that was, say, let's say it was, 5 meters high. We're in meters here, so not sure why this is. You can see a 5-meter high tree on December 21st has an incredibly long shadow. So there's definitely some useful information within the site. And usually the sun and the wind sectors are pretty quick to discover. Let me just see what the wind data. There's US wind data here.
Jamie, I don't see where the shadow was on there. I'm sorry if did I miss something there when you were?
Yeah, it was just listed. Sorry, where are we here?
Oh, it's not shown on the thing. It's just listed.
No, it's not. It's a useful little, I guess.
I see. It's 30. Okay, I see. It goes up. All right. I was looking for it on the graph and I was like, I don't see it.
Yeah. Honestly, I've never used this. You know what I use, which is absolutely fabulous, is an app on our iPhone called Sunseeker. And it is an amazing application. I'll just see if I can. Nope. I think I misspelled it.
Is it all one word maybe?
Yeah. Looks like I'm going to have a challenge finding that. You can easily find it on your phone. But that is a fabulous app. And the reason for that, one of the reasons is basically you can turn the app on and you go to this 3D mode, which you hold your phone up and it's in a camera mode. So you're seeing the landscape and it will impose the sun, where the sun currently is, where your summer and winter solstice are. They project onto the screen. You can take a picture of that and take it back to the office with you. You can punch in any date. It's very, very useful when you're positioning things like a greenhouse, which what we're doing where we are right now. We're going to place a new greenhouse. So we're going around our property looking at the absolute best location. So that's a really good one. I would highly recommend that app. And I think it's
like
either
it's $9. It's like $10.
Yeah, it's $10.
That's
$10
what
bucks. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. That looks like it. Yeah, it's an excellent app. I really enjoy that one. So yeah, that's what we use. So when you're on site, boom, you get a very, very clear idea. And eventually, you need that sort of application less and less. And really depending on, your location, obviously, if you're in an urban site that's drier, your tree canopy is going to typically be a little less. So it's probably a lot easier to determine some of these things on site. But in this part of the world with larger conifer forests, it's a big factor. And it's, again, a really good app to check out. And let's see here, we'll go back to, so yeah, that's not listed here, but that is a good one. And I believe it's only for your phone. It wouldn't do anything on a desktop. It probably works on an iPad. but you need cellular access. So it might not work if your iPad's Wi-Fi and you don't have Wi-Fi coverage at that moment when you're using it. Yeah, so that is the little bit about some of the resources for the sector map. And again, there's lots of good student examples that you can check out. And it is fairly straightforward. It's certainly a great starting point, as I've said earlier. Let's see. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot else to add to that. Let me just look at the template file and see if there is something that jumps out at me here. This can be a little bit challenging for folks where they're dropping in their base plan and it feels like it's so small on this sheet here. And because this is quite general, right? We're looking at this sort of macro. I wouldn't worry too much about that. We're not really needing, you know, super high resolution. It's not like your sector is going to just cover a generally, it's not going to cover a very, very small portion of your site. So don't worry about that. You know, saying that, this student here decided to make it larger. So you can certainly customize this to whatever suits you best. And if you back out a little bit on the template here, you'll see that you have some instructions, some examples. Sorry about that. Some examples on the right here. And there should be a few tutorials at the top regarding solar angles and calculating those. But again, if you go to some of these websites, they'll give you that information. So you don't have to worry too much about calculations. And then another thing that's really interesting about this, I tell you what, I'm just going to grab a book so I can show everybody. 1 second. We'll stop sharing, but a really interesting book for everybody to consider. Oh gosh, is Brad Lancaster's, it doesn't like my book today. Brad Lancaster's book on rainwater harvesting for drylands and beyond. And this is volume 1. And you wouldn't think this has anything to do with anything but rainwater harvesting, but in fact, there's a whole section here on harvesting or sun shading. So very, very interesting book. And he really gets into integrating all of this information into site planning so that your design ultimately is factoring in this incredible resource. So you're either going to capture and enhance the incoming sun. Where I live, we want to shade our house during the summer months, but we want it opened up during the winter sun. We're very, very lucky. We have our house, which we did not build, but we have the house orientated in such a way so it maximizes the solar aspect. So say our house is a rectangle, the largest surface will face north and south. That way we can capture during the winter, as well as we get a nice breeze through here in the summer months. But it means we have to shade a bit more, but we've combined that. So that book is really an inspiration that way. And I think on the West Coast here, regardless of where you are, we're up on the 49th parallel here, which is, you know, reasonably far north, but we still get very intense summer light levels that we need to buffer. And this week we're set to have some pretty good, pretty warm days. So we'll see how our recent shading strategies have worked. We basically have some, we have a little kitchen garden outside of the south side of our house, which is right off of our kitchen. And we have some raised boxes for a variety of herbs and vegetables, as well as some shading, some structures that shade the house during the summer months. We have beans and stuff going up them this year. So yeah, so I would definitely check that book out if you have an opportunity. And again, there's more than just rainwater harvesting in there. Okay. So I'm certainly open to answering any questions or talking about anything that people would like to. We got about 10 minutes left here. So it's totally up to anybody on the call if they want to, you know, explore anything outside of this topic. I'm completely open to that. Love to share information with people. So if you have anything on your mind, feel free. Now's the time.
Hey, so Jamie, can you hear me?
I can, Tim. Yeah.
Okay, so as you know, and this is kind of more on a personal note and has to do with the assignments in the past, so I don't want to bore people, but what I was wondering is I do have a number of questions that could really get me up to date, but I, A, don't want to bore people, and B, it's going to take a little time. Is there a way after this Zoom meeting that you and I could have like just a quickie 5-minute personal meeting and it'll help me get caught up?
Yeah, we could do that.
And
Sure.
is it possible to record that somehow with me or on? I don't know how that works technically at all. We don't have to do it, but I just wondered if it's possible.
Yes, it is possible, Tim. I'm not sure I could pull that off today, but we could certainly, we could plan on that this week for sure. Yeah.
Okay, it's not,
So-
I mean, it's not the deal breaker. I just thought if it was easy to do, it would help me in terms of just capturing the information, but I can take notes. No big deal.
Yeah, no, we can do that this week. I have some time tomorrow. Yeah, why don't you, if you go to the inbox, you know, the inbox icon on the Canvas platform, that's a good way of contacting me. I don't, because we're recording this and it's on my YouTube channel, I don't really want to put my email address out there. I can put it in the chat though. How about I do that? And then you got it. And that's, if you drop me a note, we'll fix a day and time to have a chat. No problem recording it and sending you that.
Okay, real quick. So actually, even if we don't record it, I think in terms of time sensitivity, can I take you up on your first offer and just get some answers offline? I think if we do it in person right now, that would help me get caught up and I could get a bunch of questions answered in like 5 minutes.
Well, if you have any questions you want to shoot out that you feel that anybody else could benefit from here, yeah, please do that right away. Sure. Or if you want
Let me, yeah. I mean, most of them do have to do with past assignments and some functionality, but let me review really quick and see if there's anything that's
sure,
appropriate. That makes sense really quick here. If anybody else has a question while I'm looking, let's go ahead.
While he's looking at that, I was trying to add my image to the sector compass, and it doesn't seem like you can do that. It wants to block out the whole sector, and then when you try to make it like opaque or to put it backwards, it just disappears.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm missing something.
Technical navigating the graphics can be a little bit tricky with the slides, but basically if you have, and it's not too much different than if I was using the software I use here. So if you place an image, that's going to be the bottom. So we'll say your base plan would be the bottom of
Right.
the, you would send that back.
I do that and it disappears.
So there's something that it may be going behind the slide. So you might want to then click on the slide and send it to the back. Does that make sense? You might have to play around with it a little bit.
Okay.
I know with the software I use, I can incrementally send things backwards and forwards in almost layers. So they're not completely going back or completely coming forward. So it helps to, with that sort of challenge. And yeah, it's one of the little frustrating things about the slides, but because it's so universally available and we're not, you know, this isn't about learning a brand new design software. That would be a course all on its own. Yeah, I hope that helps you out a little bit. But if you continue to have any challenges with that, let me know. It's just, and the one good thing about the Google Slides is if you do run into any challenge, the help menu, if you type in what you're trying to do, you will often get the answer pretty quick. So there's a lot of resources that way. But again, don't hesitate to drop me a note if you're running into challenges with that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it doesn't seem to work by ordering it. So I'll have to see the help menu and see if that helps.
Okay. Yeah, it shouldn't disappear.
Yeah, no, it does.
There may
It's completely gone.
there may be you know, there may
And
be a
the rings
poly.
seem to be each individual thing in there, so you can't just bring the whole image forward. So I don't know how to make that work.
Yeah, you may, you know, it may be easier to create a new sheet that's blank and then assemble it there and copy it over. Does that make sense? And then you can just delete that sheet.
Oh yeah, I see.
Because there may be items on the template sheet that that aren't visible, but you know, there might be a polygon that's white that you don't see, and that may be why it's disappearing. Almost like a
Yeah,
mask.
right. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay. Are you ready, Tim? You have your anything you want to review now, or do you want to do this later?
No, I definitely want to do it now, but I just want to make sure that everybody else is not, I mean, if it's just you and me, is that okay?
Yeah, does anybody else have any questions at the moment?
I don't think so. I'm good.
Okay.
Well, I'm really sorry about your loss, and hopefully you have an okay week.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. It's yeah, it's been tricky. It's not the only one. There's two other family members that have left in the last 30 days, so it's been
Oh wow,
very interesting month, and we're
that's hard.
yeah, but
Wow.
you know, it's all good. It's yeah, we're able to process all of this, and you know, like my father was 102, and you know, it's
Wow.
pretty hard to feel bad about somebody that's got to that age, right? So
Yeah, that's fantastic.
yeah, he had a great life. Yeah. So you go ahead, Tim. We've got a few minutes left here, and if we don't cover everything off, we'll set up a time to have a quick chat. How's that?
Okay, well, again, I had a number of questions on some of the functionality stuff, and I think that you could answer them really quick. Again, I just don't want to bore people because they do have to do with kind of you know, like the base map, and you know, I think everybody else has already done it, so I don't want to bore people for that reason. But I do think you could answer me really quick, and I think it'll be a lot easier for me to ask you these quick questions.
Mhm.
So I don't have to dig through like the help menus or not find what I'm looking for in the tutorials. Again, I think I can get some really quick answers from you if that's
Okay.
possible.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let me look here really quick what I've got. In no particular order. I was kind of struggling with manipulating the legends. So like adding and subtracting cells, and then also importing and exporting some of the graphics. So in the layering, so when I wanted to customize a legend, if I brought it over from some of the template, I could paste it in there. But sometimes when I would go to different layering, the graphics that correspond to the text would separate. What am I doing wrong?
Well, that's a good question. Let me see this. I'm on a copy of the template I'd have to create.
And I really got stuck, man. Again, since I had no direction, I was customizing my legend. I wasn't just cutting and pasting. I would actually have to change cell sizes, and man, I just really struggled. So I ended up making almost like a whole new legend. And I had problems like, again, manipulating the size of the cells, and then I'd have to adjust the graphics that go with it and all that kind of crap. And it was a pain in the butt.
Well, you know, one thing that might be helpful, Tim, is a couple of people that are on our team here. One is Dow Orion. She will often do Zoom tutorials with folks that have some challenges with this sort of thing. And it might be really useful to hook you up with her so that you can walk through. She would actually have a lot deeper knowledge of the Google Slides than I do. Even though I don't build my drawings using these, I'd need a little bit of time ahead of a meeting with you to sort a few of these things out myself.
Okay.
Yeah, because the ability to edit in here, I mean, it looks reasonably easy, but that's because I'm not trying to import anything here. Have you checked out any of the tutorial notes that are at the side of the, like on, say, the slide 23 or 22? Like slide 22 has a fair bit in terms of tutorials up top there, like how to start making a base plan using Google Slides, how to make an image.
Yeah, I did.
Background. You know, those tend to be quick, you know, 2 to 5 minute tutorials are not super long.
Yeah, I think they are really helpful. I guess and the reason I'm asking you is just because I think sometimes they are too fast, or I might have a tiny little question, just like we're talking about. Like for instance, just on specifically the legend issue, is it easier or better just to migrate the entire chart, and then even if they're not aspects that I'm using right now, they might be helpful later? And so, because I always thought it was kind of strictly that you wanted exactly what you had on your base map and not items in the legend that aren't there.